Well, I don't have to tell you what that piece of music is, do I? Especially for the older ones. That was dear old Rod Sailing. I stand for you for a very brief period, and I just want to say before I start, I'm very moved especially by the talk of people who've lost their children, and I'm very conscious that I'm standing here talking to you about surviving when some of you have lost. But hopefully it can give some comfort to you, and etc., etc. But thank you for your welcome. But I'm sure I deserve it. But there's a great feeling to stand before you here to give you a talk on my brief story, which is really a story of hope, some courage, determination, and sheer bloody willpower. Sometimes to question the specialist on a particular course of action that I was advised to take. And more about that later. Also, strangely enough, I did try alternative treatments as well, because I felt that if anyone was going to offer me a way of helping with my cancer journey, I didn't care, as long as it didn't do me any harm and didn't cost me a fortune in doing it, then I was prepared to try and take it. And I did embark on a series of treatments with using magnetic theory, and I'll talk about that just in a minute. Now, I've only been allocated a 2 time, and 1 or 2 things you might find interesting, and I will have to be brief, but me or the present Mrs. Ramsey, as Wogan used to say, are here for the weekend. So if any of you have got any questions you'd like to ask me about anything that I'm obviously very willing to talk about. My journey began really in November 2006, when I was 68 years old, which I think is one of the oldest, certainly for a number of people that I know, have been diagnosed with sarcoma bone cancer. I had no idea what it was all about. I'm now 75, and it says here, wait for gasps for admiration. Can I? Okay, thank you. So I'm 75, and my kids think I act about 10. So, and long may that continue, I can assure you. It all started with a pain in my back, which ran down my right leg. And on a visit to an osteopath, he said, there's absolutely nothing wrong with your back, but that lump on the side of your leg looks serious. And I said, well, what lump was that? And so I didn't even notice it. He, as a trained osteopath, had obviously noticed it and advised me to get it treated, which I kind of ignored for a little while and then thought, hey, I better do something about it. And this is where a wonderful chain of coincidences happened, because I had private health care. And I must come straight about that at the beginning. And boy, really, that was almost my saviour, because I went through the system like a rocket. And that is so important, as we know with most cancers. Early diagnosed is absolutely vital. And I was very fortunate. I don't think Aviva, who is my insurance company, thinks so now, because they have spent a fortune on me. Which is rather nice, really, to think that I've got some money out of health insurance companies and some of you haven't, you know. So, and I think what they do with health companies, very diverted very quickly here, is every time you have a treatment by somebody, and boy, don't those oncologists charge the private health care, which good luck to them. They've spent $285,000 on me at the moment. So that's a fair old sum, and they're never going to get that back. So they're now proceeding to try and get rid of me by putting up my premiums. And I think this year they're going to succeed. So, because it really is getting too expensive. But I was referred to a wonderful oncologist in London called Beatrice Seddon. And I went straight to Harley Street and all the fancy things that entails. And it was great, as far as you can ever imagine. Having treatment is great. And I was quickly diagnosed with high-grade spindle sarcoma cancer, which I think is a member of the osteosarcoma family. It's not part of the Ewing's one. It's the other one. And I was later told by a very eminent gentleman in the NHS at my local NH hospital, which has quite a good cancer unit in Maidstone in Kent, that really I would probably be too late if I'd have referred to the NHS. So much of this talk is about early diagnosis, and I can't begin to tell you how important it is, because that's what really saved me. He reckoned I had about 6 weeks left. That if they hadn't started my treatment 6 weeks later, I wouldn't have survived. So that there's one or two things here which happened. You know, grandma up there was looking after me, and my son reckoned that it was because no one wanted me up there that I was allowed to live. So, and clearly, when they started talking about my treatment, which they tended to do in huddles with me listening, which was a bit disconcerting, is that there was doubt whether or not I could take the chemotherapy and the operations that would undoubtedly follow. And the alternative, my son was with me, and he said, "What's that mean if you can't give him treatment?" So he said, "We're going to give your dad palliative care." Now, we in the broadest sense, and I take what our last speaker mentioned about palliative care, but in this case it was send him home to die. And I certainly wasn't want to give up. And I insisted that I could stand the rigours, and as you can probably realise, I'm not short of coming forwards, and so I insisted that at least I have a go. What was I going to lose? I was only going to lose my life, so what the heck would that matter? So my determination to survive was fantastic, I can assure you. And my weight at that time, I've recently had 2 weeks holiday in Cornwall with lots of cream tea, so this has gone on a bit, was reasonable for my age, and that made them agree. Plus, a very emotional point, Velda and I have 10 grandchildren between us. We have 9 grandchildren, 1 great-granddaughter, and I really wanted to live to see them grow up, and that was a massive, big incentive for me to continue. And through a friend, I found this alternative person, and it was run by a company called Dulwich Health in London. And they have a theory about, and this chap, Ralph Gordon, he's written many books and about geopathic stress. And I don't intend to go into it now because it's a subject in its own right. But it talks about the water, the stress of water and things like that. So it's very off-the-wall alternative. But the company is partly funded by the cancer research, which is interesting. So it's very interesting theory. And I've got a magnet with me and also some leaflets. So if anyone's interested, I'll be more than happy to share it with them. And there's really, as a footnote, my very eminent cancer oncologist, bless her, Beatrice, said to me after I'd gone through all the treatment, is that it just wasn't the chemo that cured you, which is quite significant. So what was it? Was it faith? And I'm very fortunate in that respect, is that I, to some extent, but certainly my wife, has a Christian faith, and all her church prayed for me during that time. And I just believe that that's so important. We haven't talked much about the emotional side here. It's been more about the clinical side, but I do believe the emotional side is terribly important. And the whole church prayed for me, and I can assure you, it makes me well up now, that after 18 months I went back and stood in front of the whole church, which was crammed full, and thanked them for their prayers. And there wasn't many dried eyes in the house, including mine. So throughout the chemo, which for all of you who've been through it is not pleasant, to put it mildly, I was told my leg would have to be amputated. Now, I accepted this advice very reluctantly, but I didn't want my leg to come off. It was going to have to come off above the knee, which causes more problems than below the knee. And but I said that I wanted to. Now, my wife, for some reason, and I, we measured my lump every week. A bit macabre, but we measured it on the side of my leg. And we noticed it was going down. So I quite simply said, First of all, they then said to me, right, we're going to take your leg off in the middle of the chemo, which I decided that was not going to happen, really. I'm going through chemo, and I certainly want to have my leg off. So I said, no way. And so they kind of pretty well shocked at that, but they had to accept it because I wouldn't accept it. And they said, well, we'll have to do it immediately afterwards. So I said, okay. Well, towards the end, the lump was going down, and I said, could you possibly save my leg? Well, I don't know if you've ever talked to specialists sometimes, but sometimes they look at things in a very clinical matter, and very often, I suppose that's the only way they can look at it, but they don't look at it from any other point of view. And they said, no, your leg's got to come off. And then they made all sorts of clinical things which said that if I didn't have my leg off and later on the cancer might come back and it'll all come out through the operation. Oh my God, they frightened the life out of you, you're right. So I said, well, could you do another scan? So they said, it's a complete waste of time. And they just poo-pooed me completely. But I was extremely determined. And I said, well, frankly, the insurance company were paying, so it wasn't as though the NHS was paying. So they said they'd pay for it. So I said, okay. They said, okay, do it. So very, very reluctantly, and I was later told, all of the, by the way, all the doctors, and evidently they all got together and my scans were put around all the industry, whatever it was. I guess because of my age, it was slightly unusual. And they said an emphatic no, it was not possible. And I think that's a major thing I wanted to say. If something you think is possible, do not give up. Be determined. Just try every alternative, because what the heck have you got to lose? It is really so important that you do try, because I do believe that mind over matter is a marvellous thing to have. And I liken it, I once talked to a guy, and I haven't seen it for a long time now, but he walked across coals. Now, I haven't seen that for a long time now, but it used to be quite fashionable, where people would walk across hot coals in bare feet. And I used to wonder how on earth that could happen. And that is purely, I thought it was a bit of a con trick, but it's not. It's purely mind over matter. And it takes them about a week of indoctrinating to do it. So I thought, well, if they can do it, I can have a good chance of doing it. So that's what I did. Now, after they finally agreed to do this scan, I sent it off. Now, bearing in mind that I was due then to have my leg off on the following Tuesday, I think it was, on the Tuesday. And the Friday before, they finally rang me. They said they'd ring by 9 o'clock in the morning. By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Velda and I were tearing our hair out because we hadn't heard anything, so we were expecting the worst. And they said, they finally came on the phone and they said, well, we think we can save your leg. So I was just in ecstasy. So I said, well, I'm not going to be left with a little bit of a useless lump on the edge of my leg, because otherwise take it off. And they said, no, but you will lose your front nerve. So I really had no idea what that meant, but it in effect means I've got a drop foot. And I wear a very sophisticated, which is another thing I've got with me from Dorset, a very sophisticated leg support. And I doubt many of you would know that I, in fact, walk, that I've got a drop foot. And it's a fantastic thing. And I said, I was booked in on the Tuesday. On the Friday, they said this never forgotten statement. The doctor said to me, well, of course, if I took your leg off, it's going to take me half an hour, which is, putting it crudely, a Black and Decker job, straight taking your leg off. If I'm going to save your leg, it's going to take me 5.5 hours. So I kind of looked at him and thought, he has not thought that question through, has he? Really, in any state, really. Because I said to him, look, for heaven's sake, I don't care whether it takes you 24 expletives hours. If you're going to save my leg, for God's sake, what on earth would you do? He goes, oh yeah, you would think like that. So you have to kind of question these guys all the time, because they work in a sort of box, and they do not think outside the box. And it's terribly important for you to think outside the box in this sort of journey we're going through together. So they finally agreed, and he said, well, we'll have to postpone the operation. So I said, yeah. So that's what we did. And the final ironical thing was, and all those who've been to have operations know what it's like, I got wheeled down to the operating theatre, into the ante room where they inject you and make you all calm and everything, and give you the anaesthetic. And they said, and they'd gone off, all the surgeons and that were doing the operation, gone to have a cup of tea. And basically they said to me, the girl said to me, she's reading my notes, bearing in mind it was only the following Friday before that had changed, and she said, right, you're here to have your leg amputated. And I went, what? I said, just do not get anywhere near me with that needle, right? Because go and get the team. I want to talk to the surgeon, because he's not... Well, they came down, they creased themselves laughing. Because obviously my notes hadn't caught up, but basically they'd say, you hear of these things, don't you? Oh, very sorry, we took your wrong leg off, or something like that. You hear of these things. And I had a very successful operation carried out by, at the Middlesex Hospital by Dr. Rob Pollock, who I still see occasionally, more of a social thing now. And he admires his work. He said, didn't I do a fine job there? The operation scar is fantastic. It really is good. And then I had to face 2 more operations. I had a 5-hour operation on this leg. I then it spread to my lungs, so I had metastasis in the lungs. When I started, I had 27 metastases in this lung and 30 in that lung. By the time the chemo had finished and my magnet had been placed on there, which I'll talk about later, there was down to 4 in that one and 8 in that one. I then had what was fairly, I believe, revolutionary treatment at that time. I was operated on by Dr. Simon Jordan, who's a consultant thoracic surgeon at the Brompton Hospital in London. And he basically opens the lungs up and takes out the spots, which is secondary cancer. And believe me, they're like little peas or little grains of rice. I've been corrected by my wife there. Grains of rice, and he picked them out. And that was how it went. Now, that took 5 hours, and that one took 5 hours. So I ended up there with 15 hours of operations. Unfortunately, there's another little bit of the story. On my second operation, I was taken into the anteroom after the operation, and basically they put hot blankets over you to bring your temperature back up, having reduced your temperature. And basically they put the hot blanket underneath me instead of over the top of me. I'd had an epidural in my back, and I had second-degree burns on my back. Quite bad second-degree burns. It's at that point my body said, we've gone through 6 months of chemo, 15 hours of operations, I ain't going to stand this anymore, we're going to give up. So my wife received a call about 3 o'clock in the morning saying, should she come to the hospital straight away, because they were going to give me my last rites, because my body was giving up. Basically, I survived that, and I had some serious burn treatment on my back, which still causing me a bit of problem now, but hey, it's not too bad. Another twist of fate happened in 2008. During a routine checkup, they found my heart was failing. The chemo had just about destroyed my heart. So I thought, oh God, we're going through it again now. And they said, you've got to have a defibrillator fitted, which I did not want to do, because believe me, for those who've been through operations, you do not want to go and have another one, but they fitted this because my heart was in danger of just giving up. And that is absolutely fine. And that was done, some quick interventional oncology was done there, heart surgery was done with me, and I was very fortunate to have that done, and that is absolutely fine. The plus point about that is I don't have to go through airports, I don't have to go through scanners anymore. I just show them my card, which is great. I then had another instance of the cancer coming back in my lung, which I think is not unusual. It came back in my lung, and I had a major operation to remove that one lung. Last December, I went for a routine checkup, and they found that I had one cancer nodule in this lung, and one lung cancer in this lung. So I thought I was faced with another 2 weeks of operations. I was then recommended by Beatrice again to a new treatment, reasonably new treatment at UCH in London by Dr. Roland Illing, who's a consultant interventional radiologist, and I had what is called radiofrequency lung ablation. For those of you who aren't sure what that means, it means basically they put a needle in your back, they put a needle straight down into they locate it with a scan. You're out at this point. They put a needle in and go blast it out. And basically, I was in overnight. I came out the next day, and we went Christmas shopping, didn't we? I came out of the hospital, and we went Christmas shopping. It was incredible. And I had one done one week and one done the next. And 3 months ago, I go back next week, because I'm back on 3 months checks now. I go back I went after 3 months, and everything is fine. The cancer's gone. The way it gets rid of it is the body expels it eventually, and it just comes out in the natural way. So that was quite revolutionary, I think. I don't think it's been done too many times, but it is now being accepted. And that was done at UCH, and it was a fantastic thing. And it can be done again. So that's the good news. And it can only be done, though, if they get the metastasis very early. And that's why the checks, please believe me, don't worry about going for checks. It's your life that matters. Just a tail note now, and I'll finish very quickly. I walk every day, 5 days a week for an hour and a half every morning for breakfast. I enjoy our life with our grandchildren around the world, and I'm still an active member of Rotary, and our grandchildren give us so much pride and joy that I just want to carry on living. And I thank God for every day for sparing me. Just let me leave you with this thought. Always remember that more than likely cancer is never really cured, but it can be managed more and more through new treatments. And that's why the BCRT and the work they do on our behalf is so important. And please have faith and courage, and you will survive. And I'm sure a lot of you will survive. And my love goes out to you all who children have not survived. I personally know what it's like, because I lost a son who was 18 years old, not with this disease, but with muscular dystrophy. And so I do know what you went through. But every day I wake up and I just say, good morning, world. Okay, thank you.